Okay, so we talked about the first theory on globalization in the first module. So now it's time to talk about the second um, theory of the day. This will be the runaway world approach. So this theory is again named after an influential book by Anthony Giddens. Anthony Giddens is really an influential sociologist, and he has really written very important textbooks in this area. So he has a book on globalization, and it is kind of the source of a theory on globalization with the same name. So I will begin to discuss on this theory by reading the definition of globalization of Giddens in this book. It is quite comprehensive, and it's worth to read the whole sentence. Globalization, according to Anthony Giddens, is a network of social relationships among millions of units, institutions, events in different localities. Now, if you read this definition, what do you think about globalization? I mean, what kind of feelings do you have about globalization? So if this will be again in person class, we will have a discussion about that. After reading that definition, I feel like globalization is something centerless, right? Because it is in some events, institutions, units in different localities, right? It is a social relations among millions of units. We are not talking about a handful nations or handful global institutions. We are talking about millions of units and institutions, and also events that are occurring every day in different localities. So if you think in this way, my sense about globalization after reading this definition is it is something centerless, right? And it is not about a group of nations or one nation. It is not only about nations, right? It is about an organism which is including millions of units once again, and it is a huge network, right? All units and institutions and events are very important within this network, right? So globalization is not determined by the United States, by developed countries, or by some coalitions one-sidedly, right? So this is the characteristics of a huge network and organism. All players can create radical change by effect. Okay, a butterfly in a different, in a faraway locality can start to fly, and this very simple movement can initiate a storm in another continent, according to physicians, right? So the reason is in the physical world, we are talking about a huge network of material things. We are talking about an organism which is evolving constantly, right? So according to Giddens, globalization is not different, right? It is a social thing. It is a huge network of relationships, huge network of units, agents, events, and there is no center of globalization, right? So that's why if you think about globalization, right, your first conclusion should be it doesn't progress in an orderly way, right? It is not the world described by Beck or Rostov, right? The things are very chaotic and everything is happening very quick, right? So first of all, grand theories are wrong according to Giddens, right? It is not an orderly world. It is a runaway world, actually, right? It is very difficult to control it. It is a chaotic world and everything is happening very quick. Now, if you think in this way, we can talk about the pace of globalization. right? It is progressing very rapidly. And classical economic development were thinking that the, the pace of development, the pace of economic growth in the developing countries, and the pace of globalization should be high, right? Because this is the only way to catch up. But as a sociologist, Giddens have different ideas about the pace of globalization, right? Maybe the direction of the change, namely the direction of the globalization is good, right? The way we are following is good. But if the change is very rapid, if the change is very strong and very quick, right? According to Giddens, that can create some troubles. This point is emphasized by an anthropologist in the mid 20th century, and this anthropologist was Polanyi. According to Polanyi, the pace of a political progress or a social progress is more important than the direction of this progress. Okay, if the pace is too high, then the society or the political community will try to protect itself, right? If the pace is too strong, too rapid, then there will be a counter movement of the society which tries to slow down the development. Okay, so the pace of globalization, development economists usually think the pace should be high, right? The only way to catch up. But sociologists and anthropologists think there is a pace that can be tolerated by the society. And if we exceed this limit, then there can be some troubles. Okay, so now think about the globalization determined by Giddens once again. We can't control it. It is very chaotic, right? And it doesn't progress in an orderly way. So it is impossible to predict the future of globalization. So there are millions of units, millions of institutions affecting the pace and direction of globalization, and therefore one agent can't do anything about globalization. So because of that, we are alienated from globalization. We feel like we are not controlling it, right? It became independent from our actions, right? Because on with as only one nation or individual, you can't influence the course of globalization, right? This is the alienation. This is the meaning of the alienation. Actually, it is the product of our behaviors, right? It is the product of millions of people in the world, but as a single person, you feel very powerless against globalization. All right. So because of this uncontrollable process, right? It generates it generates anxiety, right? It is chaotic, quick. It is something alien to us. We can't control it, and that's why we have a fear of globalization, right? We don't know what the future will bring to us. Okay, so finally, we want to create some globalization. We said first globalization was made, second globalization was made, and we tried to govern the globalization by creating some institutions like World Trade Organization, GATT, IMF, and so on. But according to Giddens, okay, we can try to do that, but global governance is not easy, right? It is centerless. It can't be controlled from one center. Okay, it is very, very difficult. All right, now compare this discussion with Beck's theory, right? Beck was talking about the risk. This is also the case in Giddens' theory, right? There are a lot of risks of a very chaotic and quick globalization. But Bex was talking about the precise risks. And if you can define the problem, like an ecological risk, a risk of a dissolving global community, right? If you can talk about the risks, if you then you can also quantify and calculate the risks, right? And if you can do that, there is a chance to solve these risks. But in Giddens' theory, these risks are uncalculatable, right? We can't calculate them. We don't know what is awaiting for us in the near and far future, right? So that's why Giddens is more pessimistic about the future of globalization. Okay, there is really very, very few things that we know about globalization. Okay, so if you think in this way, runaway world, this theory is a product of so-called postmodernist mood during 80s and 90s, right? Postmodernism is like a big theory, or it is a big way of thinking about various things, but one of its most important products is the post-truth era, right? So we believed at the beginning of 20th century, the truth is there waiting for us to be known, right? We can know what the truth is. We can know what the truth about globalization, modernity, what the truth about the best course of progress for the humanity, right? We could answer a lot of questions by using science and our ration. This is the belief of enlightenment and modernity, right? This is at the center of rationalization. We believed in our ration. But during the postmodernism period and during the post-truth era, we can't be sure about what the truth is, right? So that's why runaway world is the product of the same mood. If you can see that, you can interpret this discussion better. Okay, that's all about the runaway world, and I will explain the last theory of today in the next module.